Here's my audience. All right.
Did you see us?
Yeah, they saw your heads.
Okay.
Howdy. You've probably seen a geographical map of Texas. You know, you have Houston in the southeast, Austin in the center, Dallas up north, and San Antonio to the west. But have you ever looked at a political or congressional map of Texas? You'd be very surprised to see that all of these big cities are actually split into smaller districts, dozens of them too. And these districts are used by the government in order to count votes for an election. These smaller districts are also part of a very controversial topic for our government, and that's gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is when a state representative or state politician designs a congressional map so that it reduces the representation of a certain group of people. And this is in order for that politician's party to ultimately win the state vote. So I want you to understand how important this is in our society. And to do that, I'm going to give you a hypothetical. So as we all know, there's an upcoming primary election happening. And you probably have a candidate you like and one you don't like too much. So what if I told you that candidate that you dislike already won the election without a single vote being placed? Now, that's a scary thought to think about. So I'd like to discuss how politicians get away with gerrymandering, what kind of conflicts arise because of gerrymandering in our government, and how this affects the people of the United States. So Matt Ford, a staff writer at the New Republic, a production company in New York, researched one of the longest standing trials of gerrymandering in our country, and that's with the state of Alabama. And he found that Alabama has drawn up a congressional map that limits the representation of black voters down to 39.93%. And that is way less than even 50%, so there's no way they're being represented during an election. And I was wondering, how is Alabama actually getting away with this? So Dan McLaughlin, who is a senior writer at the National Review, also based in New York, has found that the answer is simple: appeal, appeal, appeal. And the way the Republican Party in Alabama does this is they revert back to an amendment passed in 1982. This is part of Section 2 of the Civil Rights Act, and it doesn't really give a definitive idea for what kind of discrimination is not allowed. They say racial discrimination, but that's very hard to prove in a court case. So if Alabama is getting away with all these court cases, how is the Democratic Party fighting the Republican Party? And that brings me to my second point, where Dan McLaughlin continues into saying that the Democratic Party tries to administer these proportional representative tests towards the red states. And what these do are tests for the majority and minority districts within that congressional map to see if any equality is even going on at all. So another instance is found in Wisconsin, where Guy Uriel E. Charles, a law professor at Duke, has found that ever since the most recent census, they've also had a problem with Republican gerrymandering. But that's not the bigger problem. The bigger problem arose when a Republican politician decided to hold an election during the pandemic, during a time where there was a strict indoor policy. And so the Democratic Party decides to sue the Wisconsin election administrators. But this was only a single court case among hundreds regarding gerrymandering and voting. So with all these court cases, that's bound to cause gridlock. And with gridlock in our government, they're not focusing on the ideas or the more important matters like food insecurities or the increased cost of living. And that brings me to my third point, which is, how is this affecting us? So Jebediah Purdy, who's also a law professor at Duke, decided to research North Carolina, which is, in the eyes of the government, one of the most infamous states. That's because they decided to promote an amendment that would ban same-sex marriage, and they decided to repeal the Racial Justice Act. So this brings a really big idea to my brain. If the government doesn't even trust the government, how are the people supposed to trust the government? Because with their actions, they've thrown all the principles out of democracy. That is, the majority wins and the Constitution rules. So with this new erosion of trust for the government, I'd like to leave y'all with an understanding that your single vote is undescribably important. That's because with enough of them, we can divert our country and society into a more positive and structured direction. Thank y'all, and here's my audience again.